My name is Mirko Nikolić. I come originally from Belgrade, ex-Yugoslavia in Southeast Europe, and I'll take you there also in a second. And the moment, it's really nice to see Tracy again. We met when I was doing my PhD at the University of Westminster. Feels like there might be some other people I've met previously. Nowadays, I live and labor in Sweden. I'm doing a postdoc at Linköping University, and what you will see in here is, comes out from that mainly, which is a project, or I would like to think of it more as an initiative called Water is Life, Non-Life, the Extractivist Poetics in the Semi-Periphery. But I'll see if I can share screen now. Yes, I can. Great. Thanks so much. So I'll go straight into it. I'll give a brief introduction of genealogy, or where my practice comes from, and whom it is facing towards, and then we'll watch a documentation of a performance, which is about 15 minutes. I hope to be that we have some time at the end. I'll be within half an hour. So here is you will see. Okay, so this is this is Bor. It's a copper gold mining district in today's East Serbia, but it is an area which has been mined for more than 7,000 years in different ways. So I'll take you to basically to look at the how extinction today is closely entwined with the operations of the colonies, the empires, and the capital. And I'll start from this place mainly, but I'll take you through different geographies. So the so-called nature resource industries have played a decisive role in the current climate and ecological breakdown and social crisis connected to it. So industrial agriculture, animal farming, intensive forestry, plantations of all sorts, and mines. So I've been following, let's say, the phenomenon of mining and the apparatus of it for a while, and we'll stay closely to it mainly, but there are other types of extraction that are involved. So as we are in this unprecedented, to some extent, zone, I would like to immediately kind of try to follow some steps, because it is not the first time we're there, and also it's been going on for a very, 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 very long time in different ways. And artists, activists, academics have been trying in different ways to grapple with this for decades and centuries, actually. So I'll take you to another geography now, and I'll read this poem. I think it's my first time to read it aloud. Hope it will be okay. It's by Langston Hughes. It's been written almost a century ago, and it came to me through the text of workerist poet Mark Novak. Langston Hughes, Johannesburg Mines. In the Johannesburg mines, there are 240,000 natives working. What kind of poem would you make out of that? 240,000 natives working in the Johannesburg mines. So many or most of us are differentially placed within what Martin Arboleda calls the planetary mine. And its traces are something like this. I cannot go through all these geographies and histories of islands, and many of them are not mine, so I cannot share them, but these are some of the critical zones and the people that have been working from them. So again, I think when we're facing this, it always comes back to the question of representation. So how do we justly represent or talk or story or pass on or mediate or withdraw and resist from doing this, facing the violences of extractivism. And here I think extractivism has to be closely thought of as extraction, close to extinction. And also, how do we do all this in relation to the stories of resilience and resistance around this? Because, yeah, everywhere in these geographies and well beyond, there is bodies defending and resisting, and the bodies human, but also other than human. So this question again has been raised by many before me, and this is not again a story of mine to share, but for example, how Nur Philip tells and not tells the unrepresentable, basically the story of violence of the transatlantic slave trade and then conceivable events at the board of the ship Zong. And I'd just like to point to this line, which is actually just at the bottom right, that it is the untold story. It cannot be told, yet must be told, but only through its untelling. How in an early work of Steve McQueen, he takes us into the depths of the deepest mine in the world, Dautona in South Africa. This descent takes minutes through the elevator. I think that whoever has seen this piece has not been able to leave this planetary mine, and also how then this story is put together with related to the story of the desperate act of resistance in the island of Grenada in the Caribbean, and how Astrida Neymanis, from an ecological feminist perspective, asks today, how do we speak with the nature or for nature, and how do we do that as a both, let's say, aesthetic but also political question. And this is her analysis is from a feminist genealogy, but also post-colonial. And yes, I really would like us to think about this this kind of imperative or challenge that, as Strida says, we must represent nature, even if it is always destined to fail. And this can't yet must of representation. How we are differently positioned within this, in our practices, and as artists, cultural workers, and citizens today. So I'll briefly take you to take us here now. So as we are now at COP, I already show. I have high doubts about showing maps in general, and cartography is an imperial and colonial technique largely. But today, because actually we are, and you are sitting close to the meet to Glasgow, I feel like we can go through this as well. So what's happening today is actually that yes, the fossil fuel industry is sinking us all, as you well know. But what is happening also is something else, that actually it is not only that we have witnessed decades and of climate inaction on behalf of governments and the industry largely, and the corresponding destruction that went on besides. But what is also happening is that actually there are many solutions being proposed and implemented already as we speak. And surprisingly to some, the metal mining industry is emerging as one of the saviors of the planet, because the rationale is that a move to renewable energy, which is based largely on metals and minerals, some of them are in the bottom right corner, which are part of solar and wind, electric vehicles, and so forth, will displace the primacy of coal, oil, and natural gas, and this would stabilize the climate and mitigate the worst of effects, and also afford for the many or some to keep up their lifestyle as usual. So to catch with this, what I'm talking about now is the actual establishment of what we call green extractivism. So the fact that the mining industry will lead the way out of the climate crisis if we were to follow current use recommendations and so forth, or what the governments are implementing at the global north. So there is a planned exponential rise never before seen in history of these metals and many more. This implies nickel, aluminum, iron, copper, graphite, lithium, cobalt, manganese, and many others. So we are entering a zone where actually an industry which has been historically has gravely violated human rights and the environment across the world, to some extent is proposing itself and is being tasked as a solution. So there is an actual idea that to substitute fossil fuels with the metals largely. So this is the zones that can be impacted by this so-called critical mineral extraction that are upcoming, and this is a study showing also the overlap between mining and biodiversity conservation that these projects would create. So what is happening is that in some ways communities all across the world are being put in front of a, I would say, impossible and unjust choice to choose between, and it is really hard to put this into words, but there is a choice between nature and climate. And this is the graveness of the moment. And as you see, this is another type of map, a bit of a counter map to that. This is from the War on Wants report on the material transition, which actually shows just some of the many sites of struggle associated with these materials. And there are many, many more, and the potential implications of and what is at stake, both for the communities and for nature. And so to come closer to the ground, I'll just briefly mention, because again, I cannot speak for some of these places, but I would like us to think of them and remember and face them. So this is one exact species that is being threatened by a lithium mine in the USA, in Nevada. It is kind of, it really condenses the whole story, where actually an endemic species which exists only in this specific area of the mining concession would be essentially wiped out for a mine, which would be used for the production of mainly electric vehicles for the USA market. And also it's extremely interesting also the story that actually this how authorities have tried to actually cover up the existence of this species and so forth, which tells another big story about revolving doors between the industry and the governments. But that's we can move. That's a big other crucial story. This is another important area in Arizona and USA, Chichilbil Dagotel, or Oak Flat, which is features groves of Amory pine, who lived there for since forever, and it is also a sacred Apache site. Their subsistence is connected to acorns here, and this exact what we see here is being threatened by a massive copper mine to be implemented by BHP and Rio Tinto, and again, this copper mine is being advertised as necessary for the so-called green transition. But in this case, a whole population of, not the whole, but a large part, the essential part of the population of Amory pine would be essentially sacrificed, because this would be an open pit mine, which would basically collapse the whole area. And maybe on more another important story here comes from Ecuador, where in a mining concession, again for a copper mine, they have been rediscovered two frog species that have been thought to be extinct. Long-nosed harlequin frog on the right, last seen in 1989, and then encountered again in 2016, and confusing rocket frog on the left, last spotted in 1985, written off until it's rediscovered in the same mining concession in 2019. And this is a mine concession which is run by Codelco, Chile-owned, and again, it would be a massive copper mine, which would decisively mean the destruction of at least these two species, but also potentially many others in this one of the last untouched cloud forests in the world. And there is again, as the title says, there is an ongoing crucial rights of nature case here to protect this area. And here I'll take you to, this is a grove, small forest of beech trees, which stands and sits and lives next to River Korenica in the valley of Jadar in Serbia. It is upstream from my hometown, Belgrade, and this is the epicenter of a massive planned lithium mine, operated again by the Australian British-owned Rio Tinto. So this will disappear, and many other pieces of forest and land and animals and plants would be endangered. Again, this is a lithium mine which is being proposed as a way of saving the planet. This would impact tens of square kilometers and thousands of people living in the area. And now, as we are reaching this whole new level of green extractivism, allegedly the company might consider transplanting this whole forest to another area as part of this offsetting and accounting of biodiversity, because now the big industries, we all know, I guess, about net zero schemes and how it's planned to operate, how the carbon offsetting works, but there is also biodiversity offsetting, which is quite dramatic in the cases of mining industry, where there is the calculations and accounting being done at what's going to be lost and gained, and actually mines are now moving towards actually saying that they will actually improve biodiversity in some sites and so forth. But again, who decides here and how? And what is how do we account for lives, especially lives who cannot even be consulted, because for communities there are some protocols of consultation in relation to big nature resource projects, but when we speak about natural bodies more than human bodies, essentially there are no protocols. So I brought you now to Jadar, and this is where the video will start. So the question just I would like to leave us with in some ways is so how many species are we, some type of we, ready to make extinct to try to save ourselves or some parts of humanity from extinction? And how do we as artists, activists, cultural workers, citizens challenge and unsettle this violent binary between saving nature and climate, so to say? How do we tell these stories from the front lines or red lines or extractive zones or commodity frontiers, where so many communities and bioregions find themselves today? And so also just to think, when you think about extinction, so what does it, how also not to take, I'm sure many of you will expand on this, but how we can also trouble, and we must trouble the idea of what is extinction in the biological terms, like, because species has been criticized as possibly not the best indicator of a community or population. How do we actually think in these terms? Is it enough? Should we think that actually extinguishing a community, a forest, is again an act of extinction, cutting it down? So how do we take this only on the population level, and especially in the view of some of the very violent human histories? So I'll play the video. Do you have the link?
Yeah, Mirko, we need to go out of screen sharing so we can see the chat.
Yeah, thanks.
And everyone, I'm going to put Mirko's link in the chat. So if you click on this, it'll take you out of Zoom so you can watch the film, and then please come back into Zoom once you've finished.
Na periferiji zemlje iz koje izvirem, nizvodno od mog starog grada, uklješten između poluperiferija, dohvata mnogih carstva ekstrakcije, propalih ili propadajućih, među planinama Balkana, dole u kopovima podzemnim horizontima. 5000 ljudi, skupljenih sa raznih strana, uglavnom muškaraca, imaju zadatak da vade, flotiraju, liju žuti i crveni metal. Kuju vrednost za druge. Hranu za vas i vaše drage, škola za vašu decu. Vaši sugrađani, uglavnom žene, rade, čine ovaj grad mestom za život. Sve teže, sada usred neobuzdane, nove masovne ekspanzije, dublje, šire, dalje. Novi dimnjaci i peći, ekspanzivistički menadžeri, ništa ne donose, ne daju rekama. Vi i dalje nosite metale među vašim stanovnicima. U gradu dim šiklja. Nos, grlo, pluća, škrge, mladih, starih, odraslih, svog živog sveta, grebu i peku. Opečeni tuđom jurnjavom, akumulacijom bez granica, u kojoj nema mira za previše i premalo plaćene, za neplaćene. Kakvu pesmu bismo da pevamo, da podelimo, da ne zaboravimo, dostignuće izvoza, dostignuta naslagama nebrige i toksičnog mulja. Da ne zaboravimo one koji su se opirali pre vas. Rudari su ustajali zajedno sa seljacima, često iz iste kuće, kad god je kompanija gazila dogovore. Sada ovaj koncern se širi, ne uči istoriju, ne sluša dok gura vas do ivice. Menja kolektivni ugovor kako želi, da proširi samo svoj interes, planove, rupe. Slobodan, prethodni informisani pristanak, prekasno je za to. Ne može se pitati unazad. Veliku većinu niko ništa nije pitao. Pre 4 godine, pre 20, pre 100, 1000, 5000. Tresetišta pamte, visoke ambicije iskovane u vatri, njihove posljedice. Šume znaju da li je sve to vredelo i mi bismo trebali da znamo. Štrajkovi, blokade dolaze ponovo sve dok. Roba putuje na sever, sirova sa visoravni. Tu gde se so starih mora stiče sa zvezdama. Oblaci povezuju sa okeanom. 1000 radnika ima zadatak da suši slane doline da bi ispumpalo što više laganog metala koji bi trebalo da obezbedi ležernu mobilnost, konektivnost posle kraja fosilnih goriva. Vožnje i igrarije u gradovima prebogatog severa i duž poluperiferije. Prodaju nam uređaje, očišćena vozila koje tvrde 0 emisija. Dizajnirana u Silikonskoj dolini, napravljena na istoku. Sve bajno i krasno oba sveta. Umjesto zelenog zaokreta, mnogi životi su pravo zgaženi na nulu. Ekrane i točkovi teških mašina utiskuju nove slojeve nasilja. Troše beton, mirisa ulja, zasecaju nesvesne vrhove prstiju. Kroz guste ekrane ućutkivanja mi moramo da učimo, da vidimo. Kakvu pesmu bismo da ispevamo, da podelimo, da ne zaboravimo? 60 automobila na 100 stanovnika, ovde ili bilo gde, ne voze nas van klimatske krize. Da ispevamo da se ne delimo na neke koji gaze putem i druge koje put gazi. Vi ste ovde od svitanja. Čuvate vodu koju su za vas čuvali generacijama bez broja. Pazite životinje i plodove. porodice i rođake. I pored svega toga, neumorno se organizujete. Blokirate puteve, stojite mirno pred nosiocima moći. Čvrsto govorite o svojim pravima i pravima prirode. Radnici susednih konglomerata obustavljate rad. Juče, danas, sutra, borba neprestana. Za poštenije uslove, za prave informacije. O posljedicama vašeg truda. Jednog dana, uskoro, za zajednički izlazak iz vrtloga eksploatacije. Uvlačenje ljudi i predala, menadžmenta geografija nejednakosti, kontrole nezadovoljstva. Zemljoradnici i industrijski radnici. Planeta ne priznaje aritmetiku žrtvovanja. Slušam vaš šum oko mojih nogu, dok vijugete kroz šumarke sve do velike reke. Između kukuruza i kuća, noseći useve i sećanja, na plodna leta, na katastrofalne nemare korupcije. Vlasnika jalovine koja je probila klimave brane, zapljusnula plodne obale. Pamtite kako se seljaci moraju da čiste sami. Ostavljeni u blatu od strane vlasti, kako nisu smjeli da zaspu od zebnje od nove propasti, kako su radnici obuzdavali branu da vas zaštite jednom, 2 puta. Tek posle 2 godine međunarodna pomoć je upotrebljena, jalovišta pokrivena. Na površini stvari smirene. U novom krugu stare industrije novi investitor danas planira ponovno pretapanje baterije. Dok nizvodno nova sila ograđuje vaše obale, takozvanom specijalnom zonom rudarenja i prerade litijuma. Baš preko slojeva prastarog naselja na tvojoj levoj obali. Nova jalovišta se crtaju uzvodno od mnogih kuća, bašta, bića. Stare hrpe otrova još uvek vrebaju iznad sela. Kakvu pesmu da ispevamo, da ne zaboravimo na živote potrošene, pogažene ispod jalovih brana. Da pevamo sa rekama komšinicama kako ste otvorene, izložene opasnim očima, mirno tkate slogu ovih dana. Da li ćete morati da bežite? Kako ćete da vodite vaša mnoštva bez vode nad glavom, ispred suše nošene neravnopravnim razvojem? Nažalost, ne bi bio prvi put. Odavno je trebalo da bude nikada. Zakon i ne zna za vas po pravom imenu. Samo kao cifre od skoro servisi. Ipak i u našoj vrsti mnogi ne priznajemo takve neistine. Obrnut ćemo celo zakonodavstvo na opačke. Staviti ga nazad na zemlju. Jer vi ste od uvek bili, uvek ćete biti punopravni članovi zajednice. Žitelji ove zemlje, atmosfere i klime. Ogromna većina bez superiornosti. U ovoj miceliji, zamršenoj od stene do oblaka i nazad, med ne može da se meri sa baterijama, šljive sa boratima. Sunce, zrači, vode, teku, nektar. Provode uzajamnost. Vaše, pa delom i naše, baterije neograničenog broja ciklusa. Vaši jasni glasovi sežu preko okeana podele i mi slušamo. Na mestu zločina spremaju se novi zločini. Gde su na meti bile ljudska tela, sada su to brda i planine. Na teritorijama u kojima je carstvo već rezalo bezbroj rupa, žedno zlata i uranijuma, sada prerušeno u zeleno, vraća se po litijum, savršen izgovor za društvenu dozvolu za kopanje. Ako je sve tako društveno, korisno i značajno, zašto pak preduzetnici nemaju vremena, niti žele da razgovaraju sa plemenima, farmerima? Zašto je tolika žurba da se sve progura? Da li verujete da će dogovor biti pošten baš ovoga puta? Kada fosilnom kapitalu ponestaje podrška, ipak nešto miriše da je u pitanju profit po starom. Kakvu pesmu da ispevamo da se ne može ići napred, gaženjem onih koji su tu bili pre? O milenijumima diplomatije sa prirodom, savezništvima preko linije imperije i kapitala, protiv raspodela među profitere i gubitnike, o krugovima sa susjedima i strancima, željnih da spoje puteve. Odnosi počinju slušanjem. Pitate da li su istraživači i planeri slušali velike tetrebove, potočne puževe, heljdu. Sve koji čine ovo mesto jednim jedinstvenim delom svega. Mnoge kuće nisu zamenljive, kroz bilo kakve fer i poštene scheme. Kakva je to dozvola za premeštanje? Neka pitanja se ne mogu s poštovanjem postaviti. Neki pristanci se ne mogu dobiti. Carstvo i kapital ne znaju da govore, da nauče jezike zemlje, zajedništva, zadrugarstva, drugarstva. Pre i posle carstva, njihovih brana, kopova, raskačenih šuma, izvan žice i ćelija, mi nemamo cene. Ne svodimo se ni na čije mere, proračune, vaganja, balans negativnih uticaja i dobitaka. Za koga? Ne markirajte nas kao dobitna smeša. Ekonomična kombinacija grafita, nikla, kobalta, litijuma, bakra. Prirodan resurs, to jest jeftina priroda. Ljudska, životinjska, metalična snaga u službi napretka na nečiji drugi račun. Ne zaboravljamo, ti drugi smo, ćemo uvek biti. Ti ili ja, ti i ja. Drugarice i drugari raznih zajednica, priroda, kultura, svrstani neutaživom potrebom za pravdom, najrazličitijih snaga i krhkosti, mi ostajemo ovde, kao i uvek, gde bi da idemo. Narušeni, zaraženi, izmoreni. Podignut ćemo jedni druge posle mraka. Pospremiti i popraviti sve što možemo, kao i uvek. Ovog novog starog jutra mi čistimo nered, ko bi drugi. Dok carstva mogu samo da zavade i zagade, podriju sve na čemu stoje, mogu samo da propadnu. Mi stojimo sigurno na udruženom radu i zajedničkom veselju. Života, vode, zemlje, vazduha. Ostajemo ovde na neke mnogo duže staze. U sredini krugova brige, na začetku budućnosti. Slušam, pratim, stupam kroz tvoje, njene, njihove, naše lagane otiske.
Hello, everyone. I think we can come back, hopefully back in Zoom now. Mirko, I'll hand over back to you.
Thank you, Mirko, for that immensely rich film. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before we allow people to ask questions?
Yeah, I think we just had the questions. I guess, just picking up the last line that was there. I think I wanted to put out there the notion of solidarity and how this relates to the problem of representation, but actually, what is solidarity? Solidarity with communities and solidarity with the more than human nature.
Thank you. That felt tremendously rich and important, and a great way to start this day. If people have questions or comments, please use the reactions to raise your hand. Inevitably, we're not going to get through them all in the 10 minutes we've got. So others may want to also use the chat to make some comments or ask some questions. Do we have any hands? You can. Okay.
There are some hands. Shall we take Richard, Matt, Joe, and there is Matt? Shall we just kind of take maybe all together? Is it easier because we don't have a lot of time?
I'm happy to cede to Matt and Joe.
I was going to say the same thing. I feel like I should cede to the in-house questions first, but I've got a question and would love to get a chance to ask it. Why don't you go first, Joe?
Okay. Really just to comment, say thank you, Mirko. Just that was fantastic and just really enjoyed being immersed in that whole, discussion really. I think the languages of Earth is a really interesting kind of topic, which really jumped out for me in the film. And I feel that although everyone around COP26 is kind of pushing the idea of indigenous or local knowledge, that is something that is really missing from the wider debate, and it just that's kind of what it really provoked for me, the importance of listening to those who are living with the land, who do know, who have got expertise and knowledge. And I think technology has prevented a lot of those arguments and discussions and expertise from rising to the top. So just thank you, really. Wonderful start to the day.
Matt, do you want to ask your question, and then Daphne?
Okay. Thank you, Mirko. It was really powerful talk and film, and I'd written down in my on my piece of paper here the Lauren Redness book, Oak Flat, and the Search for the Sacred in that book, and I've forgotten the subtitle. And I was really struck by that book and how she approaches it with she does indeed go to people whose lives are deeply rooted in indigenous culture on the land, and her main kind of interviewee is a young Apache woman approaching a coming of age ceremony. But she also goes to the Irish American families of those who work in who have worked for generations in the copper smelting. She also goes to the person in the city holding a mobile phone in their hand and looks at this sort of deep entanglement. And I wondered if that approach influenced you as an artist, or if you felt kind of common ground with it. She sort of avoids any easy solutions and looks at it from lots of different perspectives. Was my take on it.
Definitely, yeah. I will actually put in the link another book, which might, if you're interested. So, I mean, yeah, that is the key to some extent, and also right to Joe's comment actually that how. And by the way, it's really here. I'll put it here, so it's very close. It's been under the screen. Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, because I've been to as many was. I mean. In extractive zones, that's one of the questions I posed at the beginning. Also, is also about outlining that. I think that's where space for culture is really important, and knowledge is actually to also retrace, and also the notions of where extractive zone is, so where it starts and where it ends, and actually according to this to really try to do these other types of mapping, which means also speaking with people in many different locations that are effectively pulled apart, and however, also I think that's one notion. So doing this kind of counter cartographies, which means as you've said already, but also on the other hand, I think also at least from my perspective, also trying to actually really look at this always as necessary, that there is always power involved and that there is so much epistemic injustice. So actually how specifically frontline communities, the indigenous ones, but also rural ones, in the peripheries, but also semi-peripheries. That's a whole other, because I'm working in that zone, which is, just outside of the Europe. I mean, it's Southeast Europe, but it's not EU. So how to actually really do these conversations and do them as shared conversation and conversation of solidarity, and actually also because I come, from, let's not go into deeper genealogy, but to actually really also look face on into how these conversations are really set up to start with. So actually that maybe there is no question of saying, you can have either a lake, clean water and clean air, or a salary. There are no answers. We should not accept these terms. And now I'm saying this, and I'm not in extraction zone, so I cannot say this, but how do we try to work through this? And effectively, like workers' movements and trade unions are key there. And they're also being set up so often against, as we all know, environmentalism or environmentalists or environmental movements, or what is perceived as such an indigenous movement. So actually, how do we work through this? But again, staying on the ground. So actually trying to actually really understand where the conversations are being set in colonial, imperial, and capitalist terms, and actually trying also as a cultural worker or person somewhere in between, moving through these zones to actually really, put this on the table, I suppose. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks very much.
I think we've just got time for Daphne's question, and then we'll have to move on. Daphne?
It has two levels. One is responding to the film as a piece of art and being very aware of the many languages, the visual language, the text, the two languages, and also the language of nature, which was the sort of soundscape. And you said at one point, you mentioned the rights of nature debate. And I was wondering if you could speak to that, because in response, so much is about community and the rights of people and that, all that is part of it. But what about nature? Can you speak more about that and what that debate is and how to engage with it?
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to talk more about this. But I think rights of nature is key, and how do we actually really work consciously towards not breaching neither human rights nor rights of nature? And as a friend and collaborator puts it, actually, rights of nature is human rights, because humans are definitely part of nature. So again, most of these struggles, and especially nature resource industries, tends to pitch them one against the other. But again, it's, from my understanding and knowledge, it is mostly, it is a power operations, because that's how we put them to work. However, the challenge is, yes, exactly, to look at them as definitely complementing and reciprocal and mutual, and it's at the end of the day that our rights are within them, so that there is no actual conflict. And wherever a conflict arises, it is a sign that extractivism is in place, because extractivism as a kind of logic thrives on conflict, and not just conflict. And this is also super important to point out. I didn't go a lot about extractivism, but that the kind of logic of nature resource industries, large-scale resource industries, without reciprocity, and there are many definitions, but the fact is that extractivism is not only an industry, it is a whole logic which is absolutely deeply tied with sexism, racism, classism, and all sorts of other let's say operations of social injustice, and how then these are just kind of actually deployed, and how extractivism causes conflict between humans and nature, but also among humans, and it is always such, at least from my experience. So it's really thanks so much for that. I think there is so much to think with rights of nature and listen, because there are some extremely important debates there, and I do agree that it can also, that it is often put in the background, because it also raises always the kind of the system change question, or the world change, the cosmovision, maybe, if I can borrow from the friends in the Andes. So it always brings to that level, right? So we cannot just do a cost and benefit analysis anymore when we talk about rights and nature. So thanks so much.